Jimmy Sewell, Southern Bones Outdoors. I'm going to do a tip. Actually, it'll be several tips. But before you start deer season, and I would suggest the sooner the better, that you need to make sure your bow's sighted in really good. And during the season, you need to check your sights, because I've been before and think and assume that my sights were set, because after deer season starts, I didn't practice much. And practice is really important. One of the things about sighting in your bow, and I'm probably one of the more sillier ones, it takes me probably 3 or 4 different times shooting to get my sights sighted in. Reason being, one day I may hold the bow not in my hand exactly how I did the day after or the day before, or it's just like, I like to try to take an average. So if I'm shooting today and I'm hitting a little bit left, I won't move my sights, because tomorrow I may be hitting just a little bit right. The disclaimer that everybody can hold their pin dead on. I've been shooting for about 35 years. I've never been able to hold my pin dead on steady like you set it on a shelf. It always kind of floats. And I have had target panic problems before in the past. And the more that you shoot at a dot, I believe that will make target panic become more of a possibility versus shooting at a target that doesn't have a spot on it. So being able to put a vertical line and a horizontal line on the target really helps me to keep me from having target panic, trying to hold on that dot at 30 yards out here sweating, swatting flies and gnats and everything else. And so as you begin to practice, you're going to need to, adjust your sights probably. You buy a new sight, you're going to have to adjust it. Please read the instructions. Don't be one of those guys that say, well, I can figure it out. The thing about archery sights is they're made out of aluminum, and aluminum will strip in certain weathers. It'll seize together, and the bolts will oxidize. So tight is tight, and it does need to be tightened. But if you get it sighted in, after you sight in, just go through and just snug those screws just to make sure they're not going to come loose. Don't crank them, or you're going to strip the aluminum. Usually the screws are stainless steel or some kind of steel versus aluminum, and those two don't like to marry real well under high pressure. So going back to sighting in your bow, you must follow your arrow. If your arrow is hitting left, you have to move your sight left, which that brings the arrow to the right. If you're hitting down, you have to move your sight with your arrow. Follow your arrow. Up's up, down's down, left, left, right, right. So as you move it, depending on the distance you're practicing at, let's say you want to sight it in at 10 yards. Well, when you move that sight just a little bit at 10, it don't make an effect on the arrow. You have to move it a little more the closer you are to the target. So I would get it sighted close at 10, step back to 20, get it kind of, a little bit closer. But the optimum yardage is probably about 30 to 40 yards that you can really fine tune your arrow. But remember, the further the distance that you shoot, less movement of the pin to affect the arrow where it hits on the target. On all sights, you're going to have a vertical screw that will let you gang move those sights together. And when I say gang, if you shoot a pin sight, the gang is the pins. You don't move your pins individual. You gang move them left and you gang move them right. If you have a problem at 20 yards, you're hitting dead on, and at 40 yards, you're hitting 4 or 5 inches to the left, that's usually you're not looking at your level. If you cant the bow left or right, when you get out to 40 yards, it will magnify how far your arrow flies to the left or right. So the bubble, yes, is very important, but it's only going to come into consideration when you're shooting further distances. So just remember, on your sight, you're going to have a vertical gang movement to where you loosen that and you move them vertically. And you're also going to have a horizontal screw that you move them left and right. So remember that. Now, you do have on pin sights individual little smaller Allen heads that you can change the gap. That's going to need to be set as far as the gap. Your 20, your 30, your 40, your 50, or ever how you decide to lay them out. That's going to determine the speed of your, it's not going to determine, the distance is going to determine how fast your era is. So the faster the era, the flatter the trajectory, the slower the era, the more arch in the trajectory. So that determines the distances in your pin, or how high you have to hold it or how low you have to hold it, determining the trajectory. So there is some things out there, there's some already pre-printed stickers you can put on for single pin sights, but on a multiple pin sight you're going to have to shoot whatever distance you choose, whether it's you set it at 5, 10, 15, 20, whether you set it 10, 20, 30, 40, whether you set it at 25, 35, 45, 55. I know some guys that do them on odd yardages because it seems like that's where the deers come from, is an odd yardage. I don't know about all that. I come from the old school when it about setting pins. 20, 30, 40 works for me. I wouldn't worry too much about a 10-yard pin because most bows nowadays are fast enough to where at 10 yards you may shoot 2 inches high, and that's usually in the kill zone. If you shoot a 1-pin sight, you still have the same principle, and they make automatic yardage markers, and it determines how fast your bow is into which tape you put on your sight to go those multiple yardages. I guess a little, I don't even know if it's a secret, I'm sure most people know about it. With a 1-pin sight, depending on the speed of your bow, if you are shooting 300 feet a second to 305, you can sight a pin in at 27 yards. At 10 yards, you'll be about 2.5 inches high. At 20 yards, you'll be about 2.5 inches high. 27, you'll be dead on. 30, you'll be about 1 inch low. 40, you'll be about 6 inches low. And I understand it determines how heavy your arrow is. I'm not going to get into all that and that kind of argument. But if you shoot a 1-pin sight, the thing about the disadvantage to the 1-pin sight is when a deer's coming up, you move it. And just that movement, in my opinion, the deers can pick up on. I'm not going to say every time, but they have a potential as you reach and adjust. They move again and you adjust again, and they move again and you adjust again. If you set that thing on 27 yards, and you can still have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 yards on that, but an optimum yardage to set it on for trajectory to where you don't have to move it if you're hunting in an area that doesn't have a lot of openings, it's a lot of distance, maybe shoot from 0 to 30, 0 to 45 yards. You can set that thing on 27 yards. Now if you shoot a bow that shoots above 310, 315, 320, you can get away with setting it at 30 yards. And when I say set a pin, I'm not talking about softball size, because we're talking about 2 inches of rise and fall that can affect where you hit the animal. I'm talking about you need to be able to hit a quarter size circle pretty regular to let you know that that pin is sighted in for those specific distances, such as 30 and 27. So whether you use fixed pins, the way you adjust those is follow the arrow, up, down, left, right. Just follow your arrow. Remember that the shorter distance that you're shooting will determine the distance you move the pin. If you're shooting a 1-pin, same principle. You still have vertical and horizontal adjustment, and you also have your adjustment for the distance that you want to shoot. So for you guys that are new, there is no stupid questions. I don't care what Archery Talk says. Just ask somebody you know, find somebody you can trust that'll help you out sighting that bow if you need be. And I hope you have a great hunting season. Thanks a lot. Jimmy Sewell, Southern Bones Outdoors.